It's unprecedented. And they really need to, hopefully in this next section, address the fact that they don't have a way of electing another pope. They don't have a bishop with jurisdiction. They don't have a hierarchy because everyone has died off. They would have a better claim if this was 1960. Okay? They would have a better claim if this is 1960 when there were still valid cardinals, or maybe even 1970. But you don't have that. You don't have any. And that's what they need to address. They can quote all the quotes they want from all the different books and different letters and encyclicals and papal speeches, and they're going to draw those conclusions that the Pope is a heretic based on that. But I don't believe it cuts the mustard, because, again, if what they're saying is true, if their conclusions are correct, and many disagree, including myself, and there's been many things written. I mean, I just read a thing on Father William Most. If somebody does a Google search on that, goes down and explains how Vatican II's decree on religious liberty can be reconciled with tradition. The Diamond Brothers don't believe that. I understand that. But my point is that it can be disputed. And if you look at tradition and you look at the church, for the Diamond Brothers' position to be correct, number one, we have an unprecedented, it's never happened in the Catholic Church that we've been without a pope for this long. And number two, it's never happened where we don't have a way to get another head. There's no distinctive way for us to know. So how can the Diamond Brothers be correct? Just think about it. Think about it. Can their interpretation of these documents be correct? Or is it, since this has never happened, could the Diamond Brothers in Fillmore, New York, be wrong? And could these guys, hey, maybe they're not the best popes. Maybe they're weak in some areas. Maybe they don't always do the right thing. I don't think any traditional Catholic is going to say that they do. But nonetheless, they're still valid popes, because if they're not, we don't have a Catholic Church. We simply don't. And that's what needs to be addressed for anyone to convince myself and a lot of other people that the Sedevacantism position is correct. Not only, how much time do I have?
About 3 minutes.
3 minutes. Not only, see, here's the dilemma that the Diamond Brothers also have as far as electing another pope. Not only are they going to have to find a validly appointed cardinal, but they're going to have to find a cardinal that agrees with them, because their position is that if you don't hold the Sedevacantism position, or if you don't hold the Feeneyite position on no salvation outside the church, that water baptism is absolutely necessary, then you're not a Catholic. Then you would lose your office. Same with the Roman clergy that they say that Sedevacantists sometimes say elects the Pope, because it's the Roman See. Again, not church teaching, but it is an opinion of some theologians. But again, how would the faithful know? And not only would they have to be a validly ordained or a validly appointed clergyman, but also have to hold everything that the Diamond Brothers hold in order for them to say that this person is Catholic. If they can't do that, they can quote things all up in the air all day they want and try to stretch the interpretation out, but it's not going to work unless they can prove that there's a way to elect another pope. And if they can't do that, then and they still hold that conclusion, then Vatican I that says Peter has successors in perpetuity is wrong. Because how can you have perpetual successors when you have no way to know if somebody is elected? It's simply impossible. And they want to quote 500 passages. I mean, it's almost not fair. It's almost not fair. I mean, if we want to do subsequent debates on this very issue, we could take 5 passages of their choosing, and I'll come back and I'll debate each passage. I mean, we could do that, but to quote 500 passages of the 50 years of these popes, I think, obviously it can't be all addressed. I think I'll yield right now. That's fine.
All right, the next section is a 15-minute rebuttal by Brother Michael and Brother Peter Diamond.
Okay, I wanted to start out by addressing his accusation that these are misinterpretations. And if that were true, then he should yield to the interpretation given to him by his ecclesiastical authorities. So I'm going to quote Cardinal Walter Casper, who was appointed as prefect of the Congregation on Christian Unity by John Paul II and Benedict XVI. Here's what he says about this. Today we no longer understand ecumenism in the sense of a return, by which the others would be converted and return to being Catholics. This was expressly abandoned by Vatican II. So while he's saying that our interpretation is false, we've got his own ecclesiastical authority admitting that it's true. He's admitting that Vatican II abandoned the traditional teaching of the Catholic Church expressed by Pope Pius XI in Mortalium Animos, where he said that the union of Christians can only be promoted by promoting the return to the one true Church of Christ of those who are separated from it. And Benedict XVI repeats this word for word almost on August 19th, 2005, and I'll read the whole passage so you can't make any accusations of context. And now we must ask, what does it mean to restore the unity of all Christians? This unity does not mean what could be called ecumenism of the return. That is, to deny and to reject one's own faith history. Absolutely not. This is an address to Protestants. So he's saying the exact same thing as Casper. They reject the ecumenism of the return. So we've got the very authorities of the Vatican II Church admitting exactly what we're saying to illustrate how, frankly, absurd what he's saying is.
And we can see this in practice by them turning away people actually going to the Vatican saying, I want to convert schismatic Orthodox priests. And they say, no, you no longer have to convert now.
Furthermore, there's some confusion in Mr. Goli that between the proximate rule of faith and the remote rule of faith. Scripture and tradition are remote rules of faith. Okay, that's why we're not proving our point by quoting singular Bible passages. We're proving our point by quoting the magisterial teaching of the popes. That's the proximate rule of faith. The magisterial teaching of the popes tells us the meaning of Scripture and tradition. Okay, and from that, there is no further interpretation. Okay, so once you quote a dogma, that's the end. If that doesn't settle the matter, then you could never settle the matter. And that's why, for instance, if we were to apply his logic, he would have to accept as the authentic interpretation of the Council of Trent the Vatican's 1999 joint declaration with the Lutherans on the doctrine of justification, which we'll talk a little bit about, in which the Vatican, John Paul II and Benedict XVI approved of it, agreed that the canons of the Council of Trent condemning Lutheran teaching no longer apply. Okay? Now let's talk a little bit about Vatican I, because actually Vatican I is one of the biggest proofs that Benedict XVI is not the Pope. He explicitly denies the whole force of Vatican I. In his book, Principles of Catholic Theology, Benedict XVI cites, makes reference to the necessity of non-Catholics to accept Vatican Council I, and he says that, and I'm finding the quote here. Before I get to that, actually, I'll go back to addressing his quotes. He says that he quotes Vatican I, which says that it places Peter over the other apostles. He established in him the perpetual principle and visible foundation of both unities of faith and communion. So Peter is the perpetual principle and visible foundation of the unity of faith and communion. Well, that remains true even when there's no pope, okay? Because even today, when we don't have a pope, we can distinguish who are the members of the church by those who accept all the teachings of the popes from those who do not. That's why we can say that the Orthodox are not in communion with the church, and they don't have the faith of the church, because they reject Peter as the perpetual principle of unity. Okay, so that remains true even when there is no pope. And actually, this passage that he cited, Peter is the perpetual principle and visible foundation of unity of faith and communion, is directly rejected by Vatican II in Lumen Gentium 15, which says that the church recognizes that it is joined to those who, though baptized and so honored with the Christian name, do not profess the faith in its entirety, or do not preserve communion under the successor of St. Peter. So Vatican I is saying that St. Peter and his successors are the principle of unity of faith and communion. Vatican II is saying that the church is joined to those who reject the communion of St. Peter, directly denying this passage.